Welcome to the Beyond the Scoreboard. I'm your host, Mehmet Fatih Akser. If you have been coaching long enough, you have probably said it. Players today are so different, and you're right. The game hasn't changed nearly as much as the people playing it. The court is still 94 feet long, the basket is still 10 feet high, and five players still step on the floor. You still have to defend, rebound, communicate, and compete. But today's athletes have grown up in a world that no previous generation has experienced. A world of smartphones before middle school, social media before high school, unlimited information at their fingertips, highlights that last 15 seconds, opinions that arrive every minute. A world where success is measured by likes, followers, rankings, offers, and comments. And every day, before they ever step into your gym, they have already been compared to hundreds of other athletes. Well, that changes people, not because they are weaker or not because they are less committed, because the environment they're growing up is in fundamentally different. The question isn't whether athletes have changed. The question is whether coaches are willing to change with them. Not their standards, though, don't get me wrong, just their methods. Because great coaching has never been about protecting tradition. It has always been about helping people learn. And learning has always required understanding the people in front of you. Every generation believes the next generation is harder to coach. I'm sure coaches 50, 60 years old, 50 years ago said the same thing about us. They don't work hard. They are distracted. They don't respect authority. Every generation thinks the next generation has it easier. But that's rarely true. Today's athletes face challenges we never imagined. Constant comparison, public criticism, recruiting before they are emotionally mature, transfer opportunities at every level, the pressure to build a personal brand before they have built a personal identity. None of that excuses poor effort. None of it excuses selfishness. None of it excuses a lack of discipline. But it does help explain the world they are trying to navigate. As coaches, we have two choices. We can complain about the generation we are coaching, or we can become the coach this generation needs. Those are very different responses, right? One keeps us frustrated, the other keeps us growing. And one of the biggest mistakes coaches make is assuming adaptation means lowering standards. It doesn't. Let me say that again. Adapting your communication is not lowering your standards. Those are two completely different things. Your expectations can stay exactly where they have always been. Championship effort, accountability, discipline, team first mentality, attention to detail. Those things should never change. But how you teach them, how you communicate them, how you reinforce them, that has to evolve. Because the best teachers have always adapted to their students. John Wooden didn't become one of the greatest coaches in history because he refused to change. He became great because he consistently searched for better ways to teach. Well, that's what great coaching is. Teaching, not controlling, not demanding obedience without understanding. Teaching. And teaching begins with communication. This is where I believe many coaches are struggling today. Not because they have forgotten basketball, not because they don't know X's and O's. They're struggling because they have become hesitant. They're walking on eggshells. They are afraid that honest feedback will be misunderstood. Afraid that accountability will be interpreted as negatively. Afraid that difficult conversations will end with a player entering the transfer portal. They're afraid of parents, afraid of complaints, afraid of social media, afraid that administrators won't support them. So they coach more cautiously, they correct less, they challenge less, and they expect less. Not because they believe less, because they are afraid of the consequences. And when coaches become afraid to coach, everybody loses. Now, let me be absolutely clear. There is no place for humiliation, no place for intimidation, no place for bullying, no place for abuse disguised as old school coaching. Those methods didn't build character. In many cases, they damaged it. We have learned better, and that's a good thing. But somewhere along the way, many coaches began confusing accountability with harshness. They started believing that every difficult conversation would hurt a player's confidence, that every correction might damage a relationship, that every uncomfortable moment should be avoided. Well, that's not coaching. That's conflict avoidance. And those are not the same. Players don't need coaches who protect them from discomfort. They need coaches who prepare them for adversity. Because life life isn't about lowering the standards for those individuals. Employers want, marriage want, parenthood want, leadership want, competition clearly want. Our responsibility is not to remove difficulty. Our responsibility is to help athletes become strong enough to face it. Best coaches don't avoid hard conversations. They earn the right to have them. Trust first, truth second. That's the order. Because athletes will accept correction from coaches they genuinely believe care about them. Not because the message is easy, but because the relationship is strong. And that's why communication has become the defining skill of modern coaching. It's no longer enough to play basketball or know basketball. You have to know people. You have to know when to push, when to listen, when to teach, when to challenge, and when to simply be present. Because behind every athlete is a human being carrying pressure you may never fully see. Well, one of the greatest misconceptions in coaching today is that athletes need less honesty. I don't believe that for a second. I believe they need honesty delivered differently. Well, think about that. Today's athletes receive more feedback than any generation in history, right? Parents have opinions, skill trainers have opinions, AAU coaches have opinions, club coaches have opinions, high school coaches have opinions, social media has opinions, former coaches have opinions, friends have opinions, anonymous strangers have opinions. By the time they walk into your practice, they have already heard dozens of voices telling them who they are and who they should become. Then the head coach speaks. The question isn't whether your athletes are hearing feedback, the question is whether they trust your voice more than everyone else's. Trust has become the currency of modern coaching. Not popularity, not friendship, trust. Because when trust exists, correction isn't received a criticism. It's received as investment. One conversation can change an athlete's career, but only if the relationship can carry the weight of the conversation. That's why I tell young coaches this all the time. Don't spend your energy trying to become liked. Spend your energy becoming trusted. Those are completely different goals. A player might not enjoy today practice. They might not agree with your decision. They might not like coming off the bench. But if they trust your integrity, but if they trust your consistency, if they trust that every decision you make is for the growth of the team and for their personal development, they will keep listening. And that's leadership. Another reality of modern coaching is that relationships have become more complex. Whether you're coaching boys or girls, whether you're a male coach or a female coach, professional boundaries matter more today than ever before. Every conversation, every text message, every meeting, every interaction, everything requires greater intentionality and greater transparency. Some coaches see this as a burden. I see it as a professionalism. Great coaching has always required trust, and today trust also requires clarity, clear expectations, clear communication, clear boundaries. That doesn't mean coaches should become distant, it means they should become intentional. Athletes still need mentors, they still need guidance, they still need adults willing to challenge them and believe in them. That hasn't changed. The way we protect those relationships has. And that's part of being a professional in today's world. Another challenge every coach understands is the influence surrounding today's athletes. Parents, recruiting services, private trainers, social media, the transfer portal, name, image, and likeness opportunities. None of those are inherently bad. In fact, many of them have created opportunities that previous generations never had. But they have also made the coach's voice one among many. Years ago, a coach might have been the primary influence in players' athletic life. Today, you're competing with an entire ecosystem of opinions. And that's why credibility matters more than authority. Authority can make people obey, credibility makes people believe, and belief changes behavior. If we are honest, some coaches wish they could go back to a time when players simply listened. Back to a time when because I said so ended every discussion. But leadership has never been about wishing for a different generation. Leadership is accepting the people in front of you and finding the best way to help them grow. And that's what great teachers have always done. The greatest coaches in history would still be successful today. Not because they would coach exactly the same way, but because they were lifelong learners. They adapted without compromising who they were. That's the challenge for all of us. Not to become a trendy, not to intimidate every new coaching philosophy that appears on social media, but to continually ask ourselves one difficult question. Am I holding on to this coaching habit because it's effective or simply because it's familiar? That's a hard question, right? Sometimes the answer is very uncomfortable. But growth usually is. At the end of the day, Generation X, or Z in our case, isn't looking for a perfect coach. Generation Alpha won't either. They are looking for someone who is authentic, someone who is consistent, someone who cares enough to tell them the truth, someone who believes in them enough to challenge them, someone who refuses to lower the standard because they see potential the athlete doesn't yet see in themselves. The fundamentals of coaching haven't changed. Relationships, trust, teaching, accountability, love, those principles are timeless. Only the methods continue to evolve. So don't lower your standards. Raise your communication. Don't coach from fear. Coach from conviction. Don't avoid difficult conversations. Prepare for them. Don't try to win every argument. Try to win every athlete. Because 20 years from now, your players probably won't remember every drill you designed. They won't remember every play you drew on a whiteboard. They will remember how you made them feel when they struggled. They will remember whether you believed in them when they doubted themselves. And they will remember whether your standards were matched by your care. The game will continue to change. Technology will change. Generations will change. Basketball will evolve. But one truth will always remain. Great coaches don't simply teach the game. They learn the people they are called to lead. And that's what takes us beyond the scoreboard.